Have you ever wanted to make fresh pasta but didn't know where to start? There you go. I decided to make some fresh pasta because, well, I wanted some pasta, and that stuff's delicious. The best part is when you know how to make it, you don't actually have to go to the store and buy it. And it's a simple ratio. For every 100 grams of flour, you use one large egg. And that gives you about a 50% hydration to the dough. I have some filling prepared for it, so I'm going to do what's known as an agnolotti. It looks kind of like a shape between a pillow and a cardinal's hat. And it's going to be filled with a mix of potato, cheese, pecorino romano, and parmesan, a little bit of egg, a little bit of flour, and some fresh mint. You're going to want to get together 240 grams of 00 flour, 60 grams of semolina, and 150 grams of eggs. Go ahead and beat those eggs together too, so it just makes it easier to get into the flour. And you're going to just use a fork, mix that egg into the flour. You don't want to use your hands because you'll end up with club hands. And keep working that until it turns into kind of a mass like this. And then take your bench scraper and just start moving all the flour together, cut it in. You're going to start getting a dough that's more and more shaggy. And then you're going to spend the next 8, 10, 12 minutes just kneading it until your arms and your hand are sore. Your bench is going to get nice and clean. And then you're going to throw that into a bowl covered or a plastic bag into the fridge and let it sit for a half hour. After it's had a chance to sit, go ahead and portion it out. This is a quarter of the dough. And kind of just press it into an oblong with one side that's thinner than the other. And you're going to want to put that side through your pasta machine first. Now, a pasta machine here is important. You can roll this out by hand, but it's going to take time. You're going to have a good rolling pin. Frankly, I don't do that. I put it through my pasta machine with one pass through every step of the dial, and it's got 10 of them. Because what I'm going to do here is, as you're seeing, as it's coming through the machine, it's looking a little tore up. So fold all that back together into a book fold. And you're going to pass it through one more time. This is lamination, right? I'm laminating the dough, creating some layers. You don't want to do it too much with a fresh pasta that you're going to fill because it can make your pasta really tough. But if you do it once or twice, here I'm only doing it once, but if you do it once or twice, it's going to give it a chance to kind of come together, be a bit more silky, and it's going to work with you. And then from there, just roll it through every step of your machine. If it starts getting too long, cut it in half. That's what I did here. So this is that same piece of dough turned into 2 long sheets. Fold them up. If it's dry in your house, put a little moist towel on top of them. And then just make it easier on yourself, right? Trim off the ends. Cut it in half lengthwise, so that way you're only working with one strip of dough and it's a lot easier for you. And take your time. It's okay to take your time. This filling here, as I mentioned, it is potato, pecorino romano, parmesan, mint. Grew that mint in my backyard. It's absolutely fantastic tasting. Black pepper, a little bit of salt, egg, and flour. And that egg and flour is just to bind and hold it together. Make sure it's nice and cold. Put it into a piping bag. Pipe it out. You want to have space in between each one of these little pieces of filling because that's going to make it so you can properly press a pocket, right? Because you're going to fold that dough over the top of them, which you're going to see me here in a second do. And once you fold that over, you got to press these things together so that way the dough adheres to itself. Otherwise, what happens is when you're cooking, that dough is going to separate and all your filling is going to go into the water that you're boiling them in. And it's not that great. You just lost, whatever filling you made, whatever pasta you made. It's going to be a bad time. You're not going to feel happy about that. So I go through twice. So I'm pressing away from myself. 2 purposes. You're trying to get that dough in between your little dumplings as thin as possible, right? You want it to be as thin as any other part of that pasta. You don't want them to have thick sides because they'll get gummy because you have to cook them for so long. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to press them again because I want to get all the air out as much as possible and get the rest of that pasta pressed together so that way that dough is fully adhered And then the only thing I have left to do is cut them, portion them, lay them out and let them wait to meet their friends, so that way I can go boil them up, or even take the step that I ended up doing here. I made enough for 4 servings. I only need 2. So I'm going to end up freezing half of them. So go through and you cut so you have a nice trim, beautiful line, and give yourself space between the top of that pocket and where your cut line is. Also, if there's anything in the dough at that point, just go ahead and take a little paring knife, pull it out. You don't need anything there that's not supposed to be there. And then go ahead, cut your edge, cut in between each one of the pasta, and you've got some beautifully formed agnolotti. Now there's another way of forming agnolotti. This is the easier way. Basically, when you fold the dough over, you're going to press. You're going to give it a half fold more, right? So that way the dumpling's bottom end, its butt, is kind of sticking up into the air. Then you're going to cut the top and then cut the sides. And then as you cut in between each one of the dumplings, the dough on the sides are going to start to adhere to each other, and you get this shape that looks a lot like a cardinal's hat. Like I said, don't be afraid to take your time here, especially if this is the first time you're doing it. You know, set some mood music, light a few candles, maybe a glass of wine, and just go step by step. Don't rush yourself. Making pasta, when you've done it a bunch, is easy. The first time you do it, it feels a little daunting. And then filling pasta, you know, kind of the same thing. So take your time and realize that as long as you get a good pocket made, it's going to be great. So let's go ahead and we're going to cook this now. All right, let's take a step away from the cooking for a second, and I want to go over water. Boiling water, boiling the pasta. Every 500 grams of pasta, you should have 5 quarts of water. Now, the reason you use so much water is so that your pasta can properly hydrate and has enough space and water to not stick to each other. Because what happens is as soon as that pasta goes into the water, it starts to gel on the outside. So when those starches begin to get cooked, they gel, they get sticky, they could potentially stick together. These have cooked in salted water for about 3-4 minutes. I gave them just a little bit extra time so that way I knew the sides were cooked. One other thing to do is make sure you salt your water, and it's okay to salt it semi-aggressively. The pasta itself is not going to take up a lot of salt from the water, and what the salt's going to do is help reduce the chances of that gelling from happening too quickly and the pasta sticking together. It also just gives a better texture. We're going to finish this by sauteing it in some ghee. Add some garlic, and this is garlic that I had just sliced up thinly. And then next I'm going to put in some sage that I gave a chiffonade cut and then a rough chop, and a little bit of fresh cracked black pepper. I'm going to toss this together. We're over about a medium heat here. What I want is that garlic to start getting a little brown at the edges, but not a ton. And then once you start getting that, in goes the pasta. And just cook it. What you're trying to get here is the pasta itself nice and crispy. Give it a good texture. But one thing you want to do is, if there's one skill to master, it's that pan flip. And what it is hand movement forward, wrist flick back. You do that, people are going to think you're a chef. It's also a very easy way of flipping food without having to use every utensil in the house. So here we go. After a few minutes of cooking, we got the pasta ready into a bowl. Now this little bit of butter and garlic and all that, that's all you need for a sauce for a lot of these filled pastas. Keep it light, keep it easy. Now I'm going to finish this by bringing all that pasta together in the bowl, hitting it with a little bit of smoked finishing salt that I make here at home. It's fleur de sel that has been hickory smoked, and here we go. That's a beautiful bowl of pasta, and let's give it a try. One thing I want you to see is what it looks like on the inside, so I'm going to go ahead and give a little cross section. You see that little bit of potato in the middle, the thin pasta? That's what you want. And when you taste it, it's absolutely beautiful. There's this little bit of brown butter flavor from the ghee. The garlic contributes its earthy aroma and just like that nice little allium bite. The sage gives a little bit of pine resininess, earthiness again, but kind of a bright green flavor to it. The black pepper rounds everything out, and that smoked hickory salt gives just a little bit of smoked touch. It's absolutely fantastic. I hope this makes it a little easier for you to give this dish a try. Give it a try, and I'll see you guys next time.